to get started here. Good afternoon or good morning to everyone who's attending our Wednesday webinar. This is Scott Clayson, Marketing Director here at TimeSolv, and once again, I will be your host today. So to recap, these webinars that we do every month, the second Wednesday of every month, is to recap the tip of the week emails that we send out generally every Monday or Tuesday. We will send out a tip of the week to all of the owners and administrators at TimeSolv with information about things within our application that you may not have been aware of, or you may have learned at one point but didn't have a need to use it. And so we just want to make sure everyone stays familiar with not only features that have been with TimeSolv a long time, but this is a great place where we roll out new features to show you what's happening in TimeSolv as we continuously evolve the product and add new features for you. So we will be covering three different topics today. And it should take us anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour or so. So I'll just kind of walk through a few desk or kind of housekeeping items here before we get started. Everyone else on this webinar is on mute, so it will be just me talking. We do have a Q&A that will open up near the end. Up at the top of your the web browser you're looking at right now, you should see in the center there's several, I believe they're green colored icons for you all. And one of the icons is kind of a thought bubble or a dialogue bubble, whatever you want to call it. If you click on that, that's a place where you can enter questions when the time comes. And I do always ask for those that have been here before, you know this, please refrain from typing some questions until we get to the complete end of the topic that we're covering, because, or actually the entire webinar, because I have found often that you might have a question about something I'm going over, but 1 or 2 minutes down the road, I answer the questions, and there's no point in typing it. So we'll refrain and do that at the end. But then we will open it up, excuse me, and allow you guys to ask some questions. If you want to put on your calendar right now, the next Wednesday webinar that we'll be conducting, it will be on June 13th. Wednesday, June 13th will be when the next Wednesday webinar is going to occur. I am switching the webinar software that I'm using to present this, so it'll be a little different. You'll receive a few different kind of reminder emails. The ways to register will remain pretty much the same, but just keep that in mind. Not that it's terribly important for you all, I guess. So, all right, without further ado, let's get started with our webinar and the topics we're going to cover today. So there's three main things that we're going to take a look at here today within TimeSolv. One is the conflict checks feature. Now, this is for people who are using TimeSolv Legal and not TimeSolv Pro. If you have TimeSolv Pro, you don't have the conflict checks option available to you. This is one of the unique legal specific features that lawyers need to make sure that they don't run into conflicts of interest. So we'll walk you through how to make sure that is set up, how to create related parties and associate them with all your clients and matters, and then how you go about conducting the conflict search itself. When a new person comes in, you're onboarding, you need to do a conflict check. The second topic we're going to cover is contact types, and for those of you that have attended past webinars, we covered this topic back in February, but our support staff felt it was important enough to cover again the different types of contacts that you can enter in TimeSolv and how you associate them with your clients and matters, and then most importantly, whose name ends up on the invoices that you send in TimeSolv. So it's probably not the most intuitive part of TimeSolv available. So we want to make sure we cover this once again so you're very clear about setting up contacts, not creating duplicate contacts, and so on. Then the last thing that we're going to cover is, it wasn't actually a tip of the week that's gone out recently. It was a rather old one, but I wanted to cover this topic because we haven't talked about it in a while, and that is setting the permissions for both your support staff and the timekeepers. And there's a lot more there in the ways, the different information within TimeSolv that you want to make available to both your support staff and to various timekeepers. And this is going to be especially relevant for those who might use contract attorneys, where you want them to obviously do their time and expense entries within TimeSolv, but you don't want them to see anything else about what's happening at your firm. You don't want them to see other clients and matters, any other invoice, and that sort of stuff. So we'll talk about how you set that up and manipulate the various things that support people and timekeepers can see within TimeSolv. So with that being said, let's get started. So first, conflict checks. What we're going to do is run you through how you enable conflicts and mark the settings for them. Then creating related parties and associating their relationship with the client and matter that is relevant. And then how you go about conducting your actual conflict search itself. So let's get started here. And we're logged into TimeSolv, obviously, as you can see. The place where you want to make sure, again, these are for people who have TimeSolv Legal, to enable conflict search is you want to go under Clients over here, and then down to Settings. And once you do that, you'll notice in the general setting here, we have conflicts and related parties as a category, and you simply just check this box that says enable conflict search. You'll notice when you go under clients and matters, you can see related parties and conflict search as two options here, and we'll get there in a minute. But if this box is unchecked and you hit save, when I go under clients now, I have to log out and log back in. Let's log out and log back in. I'll show you. That'll go away, basically. So if I log back in now and I go under my clients, I'm not going to see that. See, I don't see related parties or conflict search anymore. So you have to enable it. Even when TimeSolv Legal, when you get it out of the box, this box is not checked. So you do have to make sure you enable conflict search in order to start using it. Then the other things you can customize here is a related party. There's a custom field label and a relationship custom label field that you can choose to use or not use depending on how you're going to enter the information about your related parties and their relationships. So let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to have to log out and log back in again, I believe, yeah, to see conflict search. Okay, so now that we're back in here and we go under settings and you've enabled the conflict search here, you're going to see there's a couple of tabs up here that is related to conflict search, and that is related party types and relationship types. And when you create a related party, you can decide like what kind of relationship is this? Is this a judge? I have, these are the ones I created: judge, opposing counsel, plaintiff, whatever it might be. And you can create as many relationship types as you'd like, depending on how granular you want to get when you're creating these related parties. And same thing with the related party types. We recommend generally just keeping it at the type of party you're relating it to is almost always going to be a client. Perhaps it's going to be a matter. Generally, though, you want to just keep this at the client type level is what our recommendation is. Okay, so now that we have our settings in place, let's talk about how we actually want to create our related parties. So again, you're going to be staying under clients here, and you're going to go to the, intuitively enough, related parties link. And you see I already have several related parties in place, like 5 of them here. But you can also click over here and create a new related party. And you could put in, you have to put in at least either the company, if it's a company that's a related party, or the last name of the person. You can then choose here, this is the type, a client, is you're relating them to a client is what that really means. And then Of course, any other pertinent information you want to put about them, including any notes. If you have a custom label that you created there in the settings, this is where you'd put the label there for it. Again, it's up to you to how you want to customize this. And you can see once you create, well, let me do one from scratch here because it's kind of a two-step process. So we're going to create, let's create, let's see, what should be the name? I think I already have him in here. I use old Pittsburgh Steelers and old Dallas Cowboys players from the 70s for a lot of this stuff. So let's say Stallworth, first name. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on Stallworth's first name. Well, let's just call him Jason. That's embarrassing. My wife would be aghast that I can't remember. John Stallworth, that's his name. Good Lord. She's a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Okay, and we'll just put that in for now. You can put all this other information, but I've created John Stallworth, his email, whatever it might be, and I'm going to hit save. And then you now need to actually click on their last name, and once you do that, you'll see things are just down here below is where you actually create the relationship that you have. Okay, so you click on New Relationship. You can say this type is, and this is a little different from the, you have client is the one I created, adversary, co-party, other, whatever it might be. And then the subtype gets into those relationship types we talked about. And then you can associate, have a relationship to this related party to either a client or a specific matter. So if it's only just one matter, you maybe have several, you have a client that you do several matters for, you could create a related party for just one specific matter. If you know it's just going to be a related party for a client, then again, you can, like anything else in TimeSolv when it comes to looking up your clients or matters, you can just simply start typing and it's going to bring up the client, or you can double click and see the whole list of all of your clients. So one of two ways. And then again, here's that relationship custom label that you may or may not want to create. And then you can put in notes here to kind of fill in more information about the relationship. You can see in the past ones that I've done, if we go back here, this one here, Jack Lambert, I believe, if I click on that one and take a look at a relationship, they were an adversary for this particular client, Longfellow Association, and this matter, the Lake Street Foundation. And the notes I had is that this Jack Lambert was counsel for Mortensen Construction when we handled the Longfellows Foundation grant. So now you have context a little bit more within those notes, which is highly valuable, obviously. And it allows you then, when you do a conflict search, to see like, oh, okay, so when Jack Lambert called because he needed some legal help, you can look him up and say, oh, okay, you were the counsel for Mortensen Construction, and then determine from there how you're going to deal with them. So that's the how you establish the related parties and create the relationship to a client or specific matter within a client. And then when you want to actually do a conflict search, you have an incoming call, somebody is looking for information, whatever, you can say, okay, I need to do a conflict search. This happened to me when I had to get some legal work done about a year ago. I first gave them my name and title and my address and everything, and they then will come back after we do a conflict search. It came back a couple hours later and said, you're clear, there's no conflicts, and so on. So again, any words you like, you can, there's different ways to search by contains all words, contains the phrase, starts with all this various things. But you can then just start typing, okay, the person that called me, his last name was Lambert. Let's hit search. And you can see that two things come up. We've created him as a related party, and he has a relationship to Longfellow Association. Okay, so that's, when you can type anybody's name in here that's in your system, like I think we have somebody named Miller that I've created in here, and I can look and say, oh, I have a contact named Laura Miller. Okay, so that's a contact that's going to be probably associated with is a client of mine, more than likely, if I have them as just a contact and not a related party. So again, it'll show you what they're under. Are they just a related party that you haven't created a relationship for? They're a related party, and here's the relationship that you established with a particular client or matter. And this is the way you can go about doing your conflict search. Okay. So that pretty much covers everything with a conflict search. Oh, somebody did ask a question, and I will answer. Although again, I want to try to keep these near the end. What's the difference between a contact and a related party? Generally, a contact is a type that you're going to associate. You're going to associate with a is the client or somebody within the client or matter that you're dealing with, is how you want to think of it. A related party is going to be those people sort of on the periphery of that you deal with as a matter of working with your contact, is a way to think about it. You can kind of make this your own in how you want to do this, because you can have your contacts as related. You can create a contact and mark it as a related party if you'd like. So you can come at it from that way as well. Generally, contacts are the ones who will end up on invoices, generally speaking, and are the ones who you're actually working with. If you want to create a line of demarcation, it's kind of up to you all how you want to create and manage your related parties when it comes to conflict searches. Obviously, if you have a contact that's a client of yours that is part of a matter that you're working, they're going to come up when you do a conflict search anyway, as you just saw. Here's a contact I have, Laura Miller, and she's, I see that she's she's a contact that I have that is, associated with a client. So hopefully that answers that question. But this is a nice actually transition into talking about contact types, which is subject number 2 here. So what we're going to talk about here when talking about the different types of contacts, we'll define the types that you can associate and deciding whether they should be at the client level or the matter level. And then the big thing that gets confusing, I know, for people, and this is what we get a lot of support calls on, is prioritizing what's the priority of who's actually going to show up on an invoice. And then producing statements is just slightly different as well. Oh, and I spelled that wrong, statments. I apologize for that. So let's take a look at that real quick. Okay, so you're going to be able to view all of your contacts under clients and then contacts. Most people who use TimeSolv, you can see here's all my contacts that I have in my system. Most people who are using TimeSolv generally don't create new contacts here. I think we found that a lot of them will create them right at when they're creating a client or when they're creating a matter. So you can create a new contact right here. Obviously, just click on new contact and do all the work. Who they are. It's a pretty simple process here. It's just data entry type work. The other, and like I said, more popular place is people will go under clients, matters, and when they actually create like a new client, and let's say I've created a new client, but I haven't actually done anything yet. So let's say January webinar. I don't even know if I have a contact. So they've created a client called January webinar. They go to this contacts tab. This is probably where most of you head. And obviously nothing is associated here. And they go to create a new contact. Now, if it's a client that or a name or a contact that you've worked with in the past, you could either go under clients and contacts and look them up here, or you can go under here and say, hey, show me all the contacts here, and then you could pick one. You could say, oh, Terry Bradshaw. You could associate them then with the January webinar client, and you can see here he's already associated with Jerry and Friends. But then you could come down here and scroll down to our January webinar if you wanted to, and say he's going to be other, that sort of thing. Okay. So most people, you likely won't be doing that, because generally when you're creating a contact for a client it's not somebody that will be in your system previously, more than likely. So that's why this, when you first come here, it's showing you any associated contacts. And if you just created this client, you're not going to have any associated contacts. So a lot of people then will create a new contact here, in which once you create them, they will be automatically associated with this client. So the other big question is the types of contacts. We have 4 different types of contacts: main, optional invoice, Related party, which we just talked about, if you chose them as related party, they would be associated right here as a related party for this particular client. Or other. Other is just a kind of a catch-all that, if there's other people you're dealing with in working with this client, maybe it's a corporation is your client and there's 4 or 5 different contacts there that you're dealing with. Only one of them is going to receive the invoice. They're going to be, marked as main or other, but you got to have these, or optional invoice. I should take that back. Or we can go and just call them other. So if we do this, if we say, okay, main contact, this guy's name is Joe Schmo, and his email address is, and we don't want to do all that address. And we'll hit save. And now this contact has been created at the client level. And then you're going to be creating matters for them and so on. Now, this is where this is an important designation that if you only have, say, one client and one matter, okay, you have a client and you're only working on one matter for them, create the contact here at the client level. They then will automatically, if they're set as main as the contact type, they will receive the invoice for any matter that you work for them. You might work for do 5 matters. And if you don't associate the contact at the matter level, then at the client level, they'll automatically get the invoice. Now, the other question is, what about that optional invoice that we saw? So if we go and edit Joe Schmo, and they had the optional invoice, well, what kind of contact is that? This is a scenario where maybe your main contact is like the president of this company you're working for, but he or she wants the invoice sent to the accountant. In this case, then, when you put in the accountant's name and email, because they're going to be, or an address, because they're the ones who should be getting the actual invoice, you would mark them as optional invoice. TimeSolv will always look at the contacts at client level and say, is there anybody designated under optional invoice? If it's yes, then put their name on the invoice. If there is none, if it's just main, then put the main on the invoice. And you only are able to create one main contact for each at the client level and the matter level. So that's how the hierarchy works. If there is any contact marked as optional invoice, they will have their name on the invoice. If you choose to email the invoice, it'll go to their email address. If the main contact will not be on there, you can always add additional contacts. That main, he also goes, hey, send it directly to my accountant. Her name is whatever, whatever, but I'd like to see a copy of it. You can always do that in your invoice options. You can always CC, or invoice settings, I should say. You can always come in here on your invoice settings and say, no, sorry, it's at the, I'm sorry, yes, it is here, additional emails. Additional emails is then, would be anybody who wanted to be CC'd on an invoice being sent. A lot of attorneys who use TimeSolv will put their own email address in here, because you do have a setting within TimeSolv to have the invoices CC'd, but it's only going to be CC'd to the owner, the firm owner of the TimeSolv account. So if the rank and file timekeeper always wants to be able to see a copy of the invoice that is being sent out, just put in the additional emails here. Or if the president, who is labeled as a main contact, put his email here and they'll receive the additional emails. So that's at the client level. Everything basically holds true at the matter level. So at the matter level, again, this is where a lot of people will create duplicates, is they think that at the matter level, they have to put in a contact, otherwise who's going to get the invoice? Again, TimeSolv, when we're sending invoices, it'll first check, is there a contact at the matter level? If there is, are they designated as an optional invoice? No. Okay. Are they designated? Obviously, then they're designated. Is there a contact that's designated at the main? Yes, then they'll get the invoice. What if there's no contact at the matter level? Then it'll go up to the client level. It'll go one level up. Is there an optional invoice contact? Yes, they get the invoice. No, there's not an optional invoice contact. Then the invoice goes to the main contact. So think of it in as very much as a hierarchy. If you don't designate any contacts at the matter level, it'll roll up, TimeSolv will roll up and look at the client level. Who's the contact there? Who's designated to get the invoice? Is there an optional invoice contact or is there just a main contact? Okay, so that again, I know that that gets confusing for people, and what a lot of people will do is they'll create a new contact here for that person. Now let's say that the person I have, that Joe Schmo, I do want to associate them at the matter level for whatever reason. Maybe you have multiple matters and Joe is both at the client level in this particular matter. You can go in here and say, hey, again, show me all. And where's Schmo? Right here. There's Joe Schmo. I'm going to click on associations. You don't have to create him again. And you'll see he's here at the January webinar. He's already labeled as the main contact for the client, not any for all the any matter. But if you want to come down here and associate him specifically to this matter, estate plan, you can. You can say maybe he's going to be the optional invoice, whatever it might be, or maybe he's the main contact as well for this one. You would do that and then hit save the association. So now Joe Schmo has been designated at both the client level and the matter level for whatever reason. Maybe there's, I can't, I don't want to speculate as to what the reasons might be. And now you won't have to create a duplicate. You should never have to create a duplicate contact within TimeSolv. And like I said, it's not always the most intuitive thing in the whole wide world. But hopefully everyone's clear now that this is how you could take a already existing contact and associate them with either a client or a matter. And you may not have to. If you've already designated them as a contact at the client level, you're only working one matter for them, then you're fine. It gets messier if you have one client that you're maybe working on multiple matters and each matter has a different contact, but those contacts, but none of those people should be receiving the invoice. You're just working with them, but the invoices need to go to an accounting department. That's where you use that optional invoice methodology. And if the people need to actually, the main contact needs to see the invoice, they want to be CC'd on it, that's where you put in on the invoice settings the additional emails. Okay, and they'll receive essentially they'll be CC'd on the invoice when you email it to them. So I hope that's sort of clear to everybody how you designate your contact types. And really when it comes to who's going to appear on the invoice, you really just got to think of either the main or the optional invoice. Okay. For statements, if you ever do need to if you're generating statements, let's say, that just kind of, it's just essentially just showing what's the balance for, a client, that will be sent always to the contact, the main contact or the optional invoice contact at the client level. So if you have a matter specific contact, they won't, and you email it out, they won't get it if you have somebody else designated at the client level. So just be aware that's a kind of a little bit of a distinction that you need to be aware of. Okay, so all right, so that's contacts and how you work with them and how you associate them and who ends up on an invoice. All right. So let's hit our last topic of the afternoon. We're about 30 minutes in, got about 15 minutes left here, and that is how we go about setting permissions for both support staff and your timekeepers. I'm assuming that most people that are on this call right now are probably either the administrators or the actual owners of your TimeSolv account. So you're the ones who should have the ability to set the permissions for your support staff or your timekeepers. Okay, so let's take a look at how you go about doing that and the impact that has on what your support people and timekeepers, what they see within their TimeSolv account. So when you go under, or to see as an administrator, you'll see under account professionals. That's a label that can be changed. There's different names you can give this under the account settings, but most people see it as called professionals. That's what it is out of the box. And here's the number of professionals at my firm here. I have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different professionals. Here's where you can see the types. Are they a support or are they a timekeeper? And of course, most of you should already know in TimeSolv, you only pay for your timekeepers, not your support staff. So again, that's an important distinction. So me as Scott Laidlaw is the name of I'm the firm owner of my account here. I can click on any one of these people. So let's start with support. So first I'm going to click on his name. When you create a new professional, by the way, in TimeSolv, by default, they come up as a timekeeper. If you need to change them to a support, under the profile here, when you've entered the various information for them, you'll see type, either timekeeper or support. And most of you probably also know, as a side note, this is the same place where you can make a timekeeper either active or inactive, which of course that impacts what your monthly subscription rate is going to be, especially if it's a timekeeper. If they're inactive, you won't pay for them for that month. This again goes back to if you're using contract attorneys who are doing just a little bit of work, they're not full-time employees, but they might be working for you maybe 4 months out of the year. You don't need to, once they create time entries and are associated with the clients and matters, you can't delete them from the system, but you would just make them, because you have created time entries, unless you deleted every time entry in the client and matters they worked on, you can't delete them as a user. You would just simply make them inactive. So then if they ever came back to do work for you, you can make them active again. So in this case, this Doug Cosby is a support person. Now, where you as the administrator can mess around with the various permissions for your professionals is under, intuitively enough, the permission setting or permissions tab. So when we click on that, if you want to make them an administrator, and an administrator basically means they have access to everything within TimeSolv, you would simply check this box and hit save. Otherwise, you can go down and you can see the higher level categories that come down the page here match what you see across the menu here. Dashboard, clients, calendar, actually documents is out of place, and so on. And on each one of these categories, you have different options, and some are kind of obvious, either no access to the dashboard or they can only view the dashboard. Only administrators can, on the dashboard, set like the billable hour number, put the settings in place. Clients, same way. You can say, hey, they can only view the clients and matters, but they can't actually enter any new information. They can't mess it up. Is basically what it means. They can see everything if they are if they're working on that client or matter, or you can give them all access. By default, when you create a new timekeeper, this box is checked. This is an important one. Access to assigned matters only. And that box is checked. That means that when you create a new matter or client, and if you don't assign it to, say, Doug Cosby will never see this client or matter within their TimeSolv when they're logged in. If you want them, if it's a partner or whatever it might be, and you want them to see everything, you would just simply uncheck this box. Then they can see every client and matter within TimeSolv. Again, if you have it as just view only, that's fine. They could view every client and matter within TimeSolv. They just wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Conflicts is the same way. Either no access, view only, all access. Calendar, same way. Now for time, if you're a support person, you can say they can enter, because remember, support people can enter time for timekeepers. They just aren't keeping their own time. But you can designate that they can either input time for all the timekeepers that you have, or you can specify, and this is the type of situation where we know that a lot of attorneys will still have their assistant or maybe a para enter time for them, but you don't want them to be able to enter time for anybody else. So this is where you would choose this for specific timekeepers, this support person. Then you come over here and select which timekeeper can they enter time for only. So just check the ones you want them to enter the time for. Update billable type. By default, this is not checked. So this would be on your time entries. Can the person update if this is going to be a billable, non-billable, or no charge time entry? And again, your decision whether you want them to have the option to do that or not. And can they view the rate that's set for them for the client or the matter? And this again goes back to, like, if you have a contract attorney and maybe you're charging the client $300 an hour, but they're doing a rate of $250 an hour for you. You're only paying them $250 an hour, and you're taking $50 an hour as profit or whatever it might be. You don't want them to see that necessarily as a contract attorney, so you would just keep this unchecked and say, hey, can they view and override the rate? If you check it, then they can. They would see the rate that's been assigned for that client and matter, and change it, which you may not want them to do. So all of that is true now for expenses as well. And if you have support people that you don't want them to ever get to the time and expense entry screens, because they're purely maybe just the billing manager, all they're doing is creating the invoices, you can again turn off that access right here and say, hey, no access at all to time and expense entries. Same thing with the billable type down here. Invoicing goes through all the different things that you have ability to do, payments, documents, on down the line here. So for example, and then you would just save it here. So let's take a look at, we're going to leave here, another one of our attorneys who is maybe not a senior partner. Let's take a look at Tony Hill. And right now, I'm going to show you how exactly this looks in practice. They have permissions for pretty much everything that I see. They have all access. They can view the dashboard, all access. They could see time for all timekeepers. Everything is pretty much everything an administrator has, just about. So if I log out of my account and log in as this Tony Hill, it's not gonna look much different from what mine looks like right now. They can see pretty much everything except the account information, the account settings, because they're not an actual administrator, but they can go to my profile really only and see, the matters that are assigned to them, what their contact information is, the abbreviations that they've, anything else that they need access to. Okay, and they could pretty much do everything you could do as an administrator because we gave them those permissions. But let's change those permissions, and you can see how locked down we can really get. So let's log back in as me, the main administrator. I'm going to go back over, see where it says account now instead of my profile, because I am the admin. I'm going to go to professionals. I'm going to go back to Tony Hill here. I'm going to go to his permissions tab, and I'm going to say no access to the dashboard. No access to the clients. Can only have access to his time entries. He can't update the billable type. He can't view and override the rate. He can only do expense entries for himself for invoicing. I don't want him to see it. I don't want him to see anything about payments, nothing with the documents that we have. He has a limited access with not even being able to generate a revenue report, and he's got no access to his account settings. We're pretty much locked down as tight as you can get, and still actually be able to use the system. He will be able to make time entries. So let's log out again, log back in as Tony Hill now, and you'll see how TimeSolv will look vastly different for him. Not many things going on over here, as you can see up in the menu items. When he double clicks, he can only see matters that are assigned to him. Okay. Same thing with expenses. He doesn't, if he does choose, a particular, he can't see the billable rate, can't change it, can't really do much of anything other than just make the time entry, make the expense entries, even under reports. Now he's only going to be able to see reports related to the time and expenses that he's doing. Okay, so you can see you can really lock this down tight as a drum. And you can see when you come over here and looks at the matters, these are only the matters assigned to him. I know that from talking to some of our TimeSolv clients, this is the most robust cloud-based system when it comes to being able to allow or not allow access to the system. And this again is great if you have some contract attorneys, or you just eliminate the clutter. If you have some timekeepers at your firm that, well, they're they're associates, they're full-time, they're full-time employees, but you know what? All they need to be focused on is making time entries and making expense entries. Let the admin people do the work of creating the clients and matters and assigning them to him or her, and then when they get into TimeSolv, all they want to be able to do is just make a time entry, make an expense entry. The invoicing, payments, all of that, somebody else is handling. You can certainly do that and lock it down. It does eliminate the clutter. It eliminates the ability to like, hey, what is this over here? What if I click on this and change this? It eliminates the people poking around and changing things they shouldn't necessarily be changing. Okay, so now if I log out, log back in now as me as the admin person. Let's go back and make Tony Hill a little more, make TimeSolv a little bit more accessible for them. So I click on Tony Hill, go back to permissions. I'm just going to go ahead and make him an admin. And you can see when I click on this, it changes all of these things to pretty much everything. Okay, hit save. Go back in as Tony. And TimeSolv becomes a whole different software system for him. He can now see every client and matter within my system. He can now see what the rate is and change it if he wants to change the rate for a time. He can make a time entry against every client and matter that's in your system if you want. They still, by default, don't have the billable type because I didn't check the box there. Even as an admin, you got to check that box to be able to change the billable type if you want. So again, an important distinction. So you can see that you can really choose how little or how much you want people to see within their TimeSolv account. So not every user within TimeSolv is obviously created equal. And that's where you end up, manipulating it as an administrator. And you can have as many administrators as you want under your TimeSolv account. It's again just as simple as, clicking on their name and going over to permissions and checking the box that says administrator. And again, that's the easy thing. It's a small firm. Maybe there's only 3 of you. Make everyone an administrator. No big deal. Then they all have access to everything. You don't have to worry about things. So it's up to you guys of how you want to lock this down, how broad you want to be with it. Okay? Well, that takes us to our 3 subjects of the day. It's about 12:45 or so my time. I'm sitting here in the Central Time Zone in Minneapolis. Any questions that anybody has? This is the opportunity to use that chat box if you want to ask about the creating related parties and conflict search, the different contact types and who ends up getting an invoice, or something with the permissions that you set for everyone that's using TimeSolv at your firm. Now's the time to ask. So I will shut up here for a minute and see if anybody is going to type anything. I guess this is where I should put hold music. I'm not that sophisticated. Should I start singing? No, I probably shouldn't do that. Doobie doobie doo. Well, I don't see anybody filling out anything right now, so that's fine. Hopefully that's good. Hopefully that means all your questions were answered. If you do have further questions or any question about anything with TimeSolv, you can always email us, support@timesolv.com. There's our 1-800 number. You can also go to our knowledge base, go to timesolv.com, click on resources, and then from there you can get to our help page. When you're within the TimeSolv itself, if you click on help over here, which is always available whenever you're logged in, that's going to take you to our knowledge base as well. So you always have access to our knowledge base. There's tons and tons of short videos that have been created on our knowledge base. So you can always look for things there. If one thing I haven't put on here, we do have a YouTube channel which has tons and tons of help videos on to do various things, along with the written knowledge base articles. So I know sometimes a lot of people learn better by watching a video versus reading the article because you actually see it in action. So I have recorded this session here, and I will be processing it, putting it up on YouTube, sending you all a link to this webinar so you can review, forward it on to other people. Maybe you at your firm don't really handle the contacts or conflict search stuff, but the person who does should be watching this a replay of this, so you can send it on to them. But other than that, since I don't see any other questions, I am going to wrap it up now. Hope everyone has a great rest of the week as we get into some great spring weather, at least here where I live, and hopefully where you all are located. And we will talk to you in June for the June Wednesday webinar. Have a great day, everybody.